The sea wind was blowing through the windows of my apartment in Halifax. I sat in my chair, watching the ships coming into the harbor. I had once steered many of them. Now I just watched other people's ships glide over the waves, which I knew better than the lines on my own palm. My name is Otis Bancroft. I'm 73 years old, and I've spent most of my life building a shipping empire, Atlantic Shipping. 3 years ago, I sold the company, not because of age. Longevity runs in our family. My father lived to be 92, keeping a clear mind until his last day. The reason was something else, my Eleanor. Her illness was progressing, and I wanted to spend every remaining minute with her. We had been together for almost 50 years. When she passed away, carried away by cancer, a part of me died with her. The pain of loss I felt every morning waking up alone in our bed was almost physical. I spent the first few months wandering aimlessly through the rooms of our house, touching things she loved. Then I sold the house. There were too many memories. Now I live in a penthouse overlooking the sea, which has always been my second love after Eleanor. The silence here is sometimes deafening. The phone rang. My son, Noah. With a heavy sigh, I picked up the phone. "Father, do you remember what we agreed on for tomorrow?" His voice was slightly irritated, as always, as if every conversation with me was a burden. "Of course I remember," I lied. As I aged, my memory began to fail me in small things, though I remembered the events of 50 years ago with crystal clarity. "Heather will have dinner ready by 7. Don't be late, she and I have plans later." Typical. Meeting me was a to-do list item that needed to be crossed off as soon as possible. "I'll be on time," I replied, and hung up without waiting for his usual dry goodbye. Noah, my only child. Once a bright-eyed little boy who dreamed of being like me. Now a 42-year-old man in whose eyes I see only annoyance and expectation. I remember the day everything changed. Noah was 13. He came into my office after school, proud of his project, a model ship he'd made in labor class. "Look at it, Dad. I named it Eleanor, just like Mom." His eyes shone with pride. I was in the middle of an important phone call with an investor from England, a deal that could double our fleet. I waved him off. "Not now, Noah. See, I'm busy." His face faded instantly. He set the ship on the edge of my desk and quietly walked away. When I finished talking and looked at the model, I was amazed at the detail. Every cable, every detail of the deck had been reproduced with amazing accuracy. I wanted to find him and praise him, but then came another call, then a meeting. When I got home late that night, the model was standing in the trash, in pieces. Perhaps that's when the chasm between us began to widen. I was too busy building an empire to notice how I was losing my own son. Eleanor tried to build bridges between us, but they crumbled faster than she could build them. Over the years, Noah grew cold, calculating. He worked for my company, not out of love for the sea or the business, but because it was an easy route to money and status. I saw how jealous he was of my success, my authority among the crews and partners. Saw his annoyance when people compared us, and found him not enough like me. And then he met Heather. From the beginning, I sensed something fake about her. Beautiful, smart, charming, and totally calculating. She worked in the financial department of the company and quickly identified the most promising asset, my son, the sole heir to Atlantic Shipping. Their wedding was lavish, almost vulgar. Eleanor was ill at the time, but she insisted on attending. I remember how she whispered to me during the reception, "He is marrying the idea of wealth, not a woman, and she to the idea of status, not to a man." My Eleanor always saw right through people. After they married, things got worse. Heather didn't hide her disappointment when she found out I wasn't planning to retire anytime soon. She and Noah were clearly counting on me to keep him company and step aside. "Otis, don't you think it's time to make way for the young?" she'd ask sweetly at family dinners, which were always underneath the business negotiations. "Noah's full of ideas, and you could finally get some rest." I smiled and changed the subject. I liked to see her poorly concealed irritation. When Eleanor got sick, they rarely visited her. There was always a reason: work, fatigue, plans. "They'll come tomorrow," Eleanor said, looking at the door of the room. But tomorrow often never came. After she died, I realized there was nothing keeping me at the helm of the company anymore. I sold the business to a large international holding company for a sum that exceeded all expectations. Noah was furious. He expected to inherit the company, not the money. Being the owner of Atlantic Shipping meant more to him than financial well-being. "How could you?" he yelled in my office after the sale was announced. "You betrayed the family legacy. You betrayed me." Family legacy? I asked him quietly. When was the last time you were interested in anything other than the money it brings? He didn't have an answer. After the sale, our meetings became even less frequent. Heather and Noah seemed to think I'd spent all the money from the deal on travel and luxury. In fact, I had invested most of it in safe assets under the guidance of my old friend and financial advisor, Vincent Price. But dispelling their misconceptions was not part of my plan. Recently, I noticed a change in their behavior. They no longer saw me as a potential source of wealth, but as a burden. An aging father who might require care and attention. A liability, not an asset. Dad, have you thought about moving to Sunset Gardens? Noah asked me a month ago. It's a great place for people your age. There's medical staff, activism, socializing. Sunset Gardens was a nursing home, not the worst, but still a place where they send old people to stay out of the way. I'm fine where I live now, I said firmly. But you're all alone there. What if you fall, or you get sick? Heather intervened with feigned concern in her voice. Then I'll use the panic button I installed. Their faces stretched. It was a detail they'd missed. In their minds, I was a helpless old man unable to take care of myself. After that conversation, I made a decision. I needed to find out what I really meant to my family. I called Vincent and gave instructions to change my will. We also prepared the inheritance papers, $5 million, to be delivered to me on my birthday, officially so that I could dispose of these funds while I was still alive. Are you sure, Otis? Vincent asked. They might start hitting on you for the money. That's exactly what I want, I replied. I want to see their real faces. As I watched the waves outside the window, I thought about tomorrow, my 74th birthday. I wonder what they have in store for me. Probably something formal, impersonal, like those sealed cards they send out to business associates at Christmas. The phone rang again. Vincent's name popped up on the screen. Otis, the documents are ready. I'll deliver them personally as we discussed. Thank you, my friend. We'll see how tomorrow's performance goes. I hung up the phone and went back to watching the sea. There might be a storm tomorrow, and not just outside the window. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The sun was just beginning to color the horizon pink. A birthday. Eleanor used to make it a real celebration, with morning coffee in bed, homemade cards, and my favorite blueberry pie. Now the birthday was just a mark on the calendar, a reminder of the inexorable passage of time. I got out of bed slowly, feeling the familiar ache in my joints. Age was taking its toll, no matter how much I resisted it. I was in great shape for 74, though. Daily walks along the promenade and swimming in the pool helped to keep my body in tone. I trained my mind with reading and chess, often playing with the artificial intelligence on the tablet Vincent had given me. After breakfast, I decided to call Noah to confirm the details of the evening's celebration. Heather answered the phone. Good morning, Otis. Her voice sounded strained, as if my call had interrupted something important. Happy birthday. Thank you, Heather. Is Noah around? He's in the shower. Can I give him a message? I just wanted to confirm the time of today's meeting. Pause. I could almost physically feel her mentally checking their schedules, trying to remember what time slot they'd scheduled with me. We're expecting you by 6 p.m., she finally said. And Otis, could you bring a bottle of that red wine you brought over for Christmas? Noah really liked it. There you go. Even on my birthday, they expect me to bring treats. I held back a chuckle. Of course, Heather. See you tonight. As I hung up the phone, I decided I needed a walk today. Halifax is especially beautiful this time of year. Golden October with its clear air and falling leaves. I put on a light coat and headed for the waterfront. My route took me past Noah and Heather's house. I hadn't planned on stopping, but as I passed, I noticed a catering company's car outside their house. Curiosity got the best of me. I stealthily approached the kitchen window, which looked out onto a garden surrounded by a tall hedge. Voices were clearly audible through the ajar window. Did you order the cake? Noah's voice sounded irritated. Of course I did. Nothing fancy, just to be formal, Heather replied. I chose something simple with minimal decorations. Why splurge? Yeah, you don't want to splurge on an old man. In another year, 2 at the most, we'll have to deal with the nursing home issue. Dr. Malcolm said people his age often develop dementia. I froze. Dr. Malcolm? My doctor was talking to my son about my health? That's a violation of medical ethics. You talked to my doctor? Heather sounded surprised. We met by chance at the golf club. He didn't talk specifically about my father, just mentioned a statistic. And I put 2 and 2 together. Dad's becoming increasingly distracted. So what do you suggest? We need to start paving the way for Sunset Gardens. The sooner he moves there, the better for everyone. His apartment can be rented or sold, and the money can be used to pay for his upkeep there. I clenched my fists. My apartment had been bought with my money, and I'd never once said I wanted Noah to have it. What if he says no? Heather asked. I know a lawyer. If it's confirmed that my father is losing his decision-making ability, we can get a guardianship. For his own good, of course. I couldn't believe my ears. My own son was planning to have me declared incompetent. I hope tonight goes quickly, Heather sighed. I made a reservation at Le Chateau for 8:30. If we finish this birthday party by 8, we can make it to dinner. Don't worry, Dad never stays late. He'll be grateful we even remembered him. Their laughter cut to the heart. I quietly backed away from the window, trying not to make my presence known. It wasn't my age that made me dizzy, but what I'd heard. My own son considered me a burden, a nuisance in his life. I continued my walk, but the joy of the sunny day had evaporated. The promenade, usually soothing, now seemed empty and cold. I looked at the ships and thought about how easy it would be to get on one and sail away, to start over somewhere where no one knew me. But I was never a coward. I hadn't run away from my problems when I'd been caught in a storm in the North Sea on a dinghy when I was 25, or when the company was on the verge of bankruptcy during the oil crisis, or when Eleanor's illness had been diagnosed. Nor was I going to run now. Instead, I pulled out my cell phone and called Vincent. Vince, change of plans. Can you be at Noah's house by 7 p.m.? And bring copies of all the documents we talked about. Something wrong, Otis? Just thought I'd speed things up. I want to see their faces sooner than I planned. After that, I went to my favorite liquor store and bought a bottle of the very wine Heather had asked for. Not the most expensive, but decent enough to impress their friends. I also stopped by the jewelry store and bought some elegant cufflinks, a gift for my son, who never appreciated my gifts. Back home, I spent a few hours reflecting on my life, about the decisions that had brought me to this moment, about where I'd gone wrong with Noah. Could it be that I really was paying too little attention to him, or was it something else? I pulled out an old photo album, one of the few items I'd taken from Eleanor and me at home. Here's Noah, a newborn, in the arms of a beaming Eleanor. Here he is 5, sitting on my shoulders during the Canada Day parade. Here's his high school graduation. He's smiling, but even then there was a kind of aloofness in his eyes. When exactly did he start seeing me as a wallet instead of a father? When did caring become an obligation? I couldn't pinpoint that moment, but I felt that it happened gradually, year after year, in small steps of estrangement. It was especially bitter to think of Eleanor's efforts to keep our family united. Even in her final months, when the pain became unbearable, she insisted on family dinners, trying to build a bridge between Noah and me. Perhaps she sensed that with her gone, that bridge would finally collapse. Promise me you won't be too hard on him, she said one day when we were alone in the hospital room. He just doesn't know how to show his feelings, like you do at his age. I made a promise, and I tried to keep it, even when Noah and Heather started avoiding us, finding new excuses not to visit Eleanor, who was dying. By 6 o'clock, I was fully prepared for the evening. The suit Eleanor had given me for our last New Year's Eve together fit a little looser. I'd lost weight since her death, but it still looked immaculate. I combed my thinning gray hair, put on Eleanor's favorite watch, her last gift to me, and grabbing a bottle of wine and packaged cufflinks, hailed a cab. Noah and Heather's house was in an upscale neighborhood in Halifax. It was 3 stories high, overlooking the bay, with a manicured garden and pool, everything a successful family should have. A house I'd helped them buy with a substantial down payment. The cab stopped at the gate at 6 o'clock sharp. I paid the driver and walked slowly down the driveway to the house. The windows were brightly lit, but it didn't feel like a holiday. It felt more like a business meeting. I rang the doorbell. Heather opened, dressed in a simple black dress, too formal for a family dinner. Otis, you're as accurate as always. She smiled strangely and accepted the bottle of wine. Come on in. Noah is in the living room. I made my way into the spacious living room. Noah was standing at the bar, pouring himself a whiskey. He turned and raised his glass at my appearance. Happy birthday, Dad. Drink? Thanks, I nodded. Scotch, if I may. Noah poured me a drink and handed me the glass. We clinked glasses in silence. How are you feeling? He asked after a pause, clearly not knowing what else to say to me. Not bad for my age, I replied. How's business? Noah worked as a financial consultant. He'd tried to start his own business after the company was sold, but without my connections and reputation, it was harder than he'd expected. Expanding, he shrugged. Got a few new clients. The conversation didn't flow. We stood there like two strangers who just happened to be in the same room. Heather came back from the kitchen. Dinner's almost ready. We just have to wait for the caterer to set up. You ordered catering for me? I raised an eyebrow. I shouldn't have gone to such expense. A light blush spread across Heather's cheeks. She knew I was referring to the conversation I'd overheard this morning. Oh, come on, Otis. Today's a special day. She quickly pulled herself together. Besides, we still have a business dinner tonight, so the catering was booked anyway. I nodded, pretending to believe her. Inwardly, I was preparing myself for an evening of fake smiles and empty conversations. An evening that was going to be a turning point in our relationship. I sat in my chair, sipping my scotch and watching Noah and Heather fidget, trying to pretend everything was going according to plan. In fact, they were clearly counting the minutes until they could send me home and do their own thing. In my mind, I could already picture the look on their faces when Vincent showed up with the paperwork. Maybe it was petty of me, but after everything I'd heard today, I wanted to shake up their world as much as they'd shaken up mine. I decided for myself that not 1 cent of my money would go to them. It would all go to the Halifax Young Sailors Fund, an idea Eleanor and I had discussed years ago. A fund to help talented kids from poor families get an education and enter the maritime business. It would be the right legacy, not money for my son, who sees me only as a source of income, but opportunities for those who truly love the sea and are willing to work as I did, starting at the bottom. Dinner is ready, Heather announced, interrupting my musings. Come into the dining room, Otis. I finished my scotch and, leaning on my cane more for effect than necessity, headed into the dining room. On the table were 3 dishes of food that clearly hadn't been prepared by Heather. In the center of the table was a cake, covered by a box for now. I sat down in my seat, preparing myself for the performance that was about to begin. Dinner passed in an oppressive silence. Heather occasionally broke the silence with questions about my health, but there was no genuine interest in her voice. Noah was absorbed in his own thoughts, occasionally glancing at his watch. Clearly, mentally, he was already at his business dinner at Le Chateau. I slowly ate the salmon prepared by the catering service. The dish was bland, as it had been all evening. Eleanor never ordered food for our family dinners. She cooked herself, putting her soul into each dish, especially on birthdays, when the table was full of my favorites. How did you like the food, Otis? Heather asked, noticing me moving my plate away. It's pretty good, I said, not hiding my indifference. It's one of the best caterers in Halifax, she said with a touch of irritation. Very popular with the city's elite. Maybe the city's elite have forgotten what home-cooked food looks like, I countered. Heather pursed her lips but didn't say anything. Noah gave me a disapproving look. You never like anything, do you, Father? You can always find something to pick on. I looked him in the eye. I'm sorry if I hurt your feelings, Noah. I just remembered how your mother used to cook for birthdays. The mention of Eleanor softened his gaze for a moment, but then he shut down again. That was a long time ago, he cut off. Times change. Some things shouldn't change, I replied quietly. Like respecting your parents. There was an awkward pause. Heather tried to smooth things over by offering dessert. She stood up and went to the cake, which had been on a separate table all this time. I hope you like chocolate, Otis. This is a specialty cake from Delicia's. She took the lid off the box, and I saw the cake. On the dark brown icing and white cream was written, "Helpless old man out." I froze, not believing my eyes. Did they really despise me so much that they didn't even hide it? Or was this a particularly cruel joke? Heather, seeing the inscription, flinched and tried to cover the cake, but it was too late. I had already read the whole thing. What does it mean? I asked quietly, but there was steel in my voice. Dad, it's just a stupid joke, Noah started, but his face was a mixture of confusion and amusement. Apparently, the pastry chef had mixed up the orders. Yes, of course, a terrible mistake, Heather said, but her eyes avoided my gaze. I'll call Delicia immediately and demand an explanation. You don't have to, I rose slowly from my chair. I think the pastry chef filled the order exactly as ordered. What do you mean? Noah stood up too, his face starting to redden. I heard your conversation this morning, Noah. About the useless old man. How you hope I'll be in a nursing home soon. About your plans to get me a guardianship. Noah and Heather's faces widened in surprise. They clearly hadn't expected me to know what they were planning. You've been spying on us? Noah went on the offensive, a typical tactic when you're feeling cornered. I was passing by your house and heard the conversation through the open window. Call it what you want. Heather tried to salvage the situation. Otis, you misunderstood. We were talking about sending me to Sunset Gardens and disposing of my apartment. How my doctor broke confidentiality and discussed my health with my son. About how you made reservations at a restaurant for 8:30 to get rid of me as soon as possible. What exactly did I misunderstand, Heather? She fell silent, unable to find the words to justify herself. Noah, however, decided to go all in. You know what, Dad? Yeah, we talked about this. Because you're becoming a liability, you're getting older, and soon you're going to need constant care. Heather and I can't devote our whole lives to you. We have our own family, our own plans. Family? I grinned bitterly. You call that family? When was the last time you took an interest in my life for something other than money or obligations? And when was the last time you took an interest in my life for something other than criticizing my decisions? Noah parried. You always thought you knew better, the great Otis Bancroft, king of the seas, and I've always been but a shadow in your light. I gave you everything. My voice went up an octave. Education, opportunity, support. I tried to teach you everything I knew. You gave me everything except what really mattered. Noah's face contorted with anger. Your time, your attention, your approval. You were so busy building your empire that you forgot about your own son. His words hurt more than I expected. There was a truth in them that I didn't want to admit. But now it wasn't about past mistakes. It was about real betrayal. And that justifies this? I pointed to the cake with the offending inscription. Noah suddenly laughed. It was a cold, unpleasant laugh. And you know what, Father? Yes, it's excusable. That cake is just a joke. A mean one, maybe, but a joke. What you've done to me my whole life is no joke. You've always made me feel like I'm not good enough. Not smart enough, not strong enough, not like you enough. Heather put a hand on his shoulder, but he shook it off. No, let him hear. Let him know what it was like to feel inadequate. A helpless old man who needs to get out. That's how you've made me feel my whole life. A helpless boy who will never be like his father. I stood there, stunned by this flash of rage. Had I really been such a bad father? Was I so blinded in my pursuit of success that I didn't see my son suffering? At that moment, the doorbell rang. Heather, obviously delighted at the opportunity to interrupt this unpleasant conversation, hurried to open the door. Vincent entered the dining room a moment later, briefcase in hand. I'm sorry to intrude, he said, sizing up the tense situation. I'd hoped to catch the celebration in full swing. Vincent, I tried to collect my thoughts. You're just in time. Who is it? Noah asked, still heated from our fight. Vincent Price, my financial advisor and attorney, I introduced him. He brought some documents you might be interested in. Vincent opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. Just as we discussed, Otis, the documents transfer $5 million into your personal account for disposition during your lifetime. The remainder of the assets will be left to be administered by the trust according to your instructions. I noticed the change in Noah and Heather's faces. Their eyes widened, their jaws literally dropped. $5 million? Heather asked in a weak voice. But we thought that I was broke? I couldn't hold back a bitter chuckle. That I'd spent all the money from the sale of the company? That's a convenient assumption, isn't it? Justifies the way you treat me. Noah looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. Dad, I don't understand. Why did you keep this from us? Why did you have to tell us? I shrugged. So you'd treat me better because of the money? I wanted to know what I meant to you without my fortune. And I think I have my answer. I nodded at the cake. Vincent, seeing the tension, tried to smooth things over. Otis has worked long and hard to build his legacy. These funds are only a portion of his estate. The rest is managed by a trust with very specific instructions. What kind of instructions? Noah asked, and I could see his expression change quickly. Anger was giving way to calculation. It's confidential, Vincent answered. Otis will decide when and what to tell you. Noah turned to me, and I was surprised to see tears in his eyes. Whether they were real or fake, I couldn't tell. Dad, I'm so sorry. That cake was a stupid joke. I never meant to hurt you. Really, Otis, Heather said, her voice suddenly soft and caring. It's just a misunderstanding. That's not what we ordered. I looked at them, and I felt physically sickened by their hypocrisy. A minute ago, Noah was yelling that I deserved to be treated this way, and now he was pretending it was just a bad joke. I should have told you how I felt earlier, Noah continued, stepping closer. About how much I missed your attention, but that doesn't excuse my behavior. I'm sorry, please. He tried to take my hand, but I pulled away. Don't, Noah. Don't humiliate us both any further. I mean it, Father. There was a pleading note in his voice. I was angry, hurt, but I never meant to hurt you. Heather moved closer too, her face expressing remorse. Otis, let me make this right. I'll call the restaurant right now and cancel the reservation. We'll spend the evening together as a family. As a family? I looked at them both. We never had a family. It was just an appearance. That's not true, Noah argued, tears streaming down his cheeks now. We are a family. I'm your son, and I love you no matter what. Despite the fact that I'm a helpless old man, I nodded at the cake. Forget the damn cake, Noah waved his hand in despair. It was a stupid, cruel joke. I don't think of you that way, I swear. He knelt down in front of me, taking my hands in his. Heather followed suit, kneeling beside him. Please, Otis, she whispered. Give us a chance to make things right. We've been terrible to you, but we can change. Right, Noah? Yes, Father, please. Noah squeezed my hands tighter. Forgive us. We'll do anything to make it up to you. I looked down at them, my son and his wife on their knees, begging for forgiveness. An hour ago, they were laughing at the idea of sending me to a nursing home, and now they were feigning remorse, all because of $5 million. Vincent stood back, watching the scene with undisguised disgust. He knew me well enough to know how I felt. Otis, he said softly, perhaps we should discuss the documents in a quieter setting. I nodded, releasing my hands from Noah's grip. Yeah, you're right. I think we're done celebrating for the day. No, please. Noah jumped to his feet. Stay, Father. We can start over. Forget this terrible incident. I'll never forget it, Noah, I replied quietly. And I'll never forget the look on your face when you laughed at my humiliation, and how quickly you turned from anger to remorse when you found out about the money. It wasn't about the money, he protested. I just realized how much I'd hurt you. Realized right after you found out about the $5 million, I said. What an amazing coincidence. Heather rose from her knees too, her eyes full of tears. But I saw her glance quickly at Vincent's briefcase. Otis, please, she tried to take my hand. Let's not make any hasty decisions. We've all said things we regret. I don't regret anything, I replied. On the contrary, I'm grateful for this evening. It has clarified everything. I turned to Vincent. Let's get out of here. I think my real birthday is just beginning. As we headed for the exit, Noah rushed after us. Dad, wait, let's talk. I really love you. It's not about the money. I turned around at the door. You know, Noah, the sad thing is, part of me wants to believe you, wants to think that somewhere deep down inside you're still that boy who built a model ship and named it after his mom. But even if you are, you've buried it too deep. With those words, I walked out of the house, leaving my son and his wife in a daze. Vincent supported me under his arm as we walked to his car. Are you okay? He asked as we pulled away. No, I answered honestly. But I would be. I stared out the window at the lights of Halifax and thought about how tonight had really been a turning point in my life. Not in the way I'd expected, but perhaps exactly the way it needed to be. The morning after my birthday was overcast. Heavy clouds hung over Halifax, threatening rain. I sat by the window with a cup of strong tea and watched the waves crashing against the shore. The sea always calmed me, even when it raged. Especially when it raged. There was an honesty about it that was sorely lacking in human relationships. Last night left a bitter aftertaste. I'd expected the revelation of my financial situation to change Noah and Heather's behavior, but the reality exceeded expectations. Their transformation from contemptuous relatives to caring family members was so swift and theatrical that in another situation I might have laughed, but I was not laughing now. The phone rang, interrupting my musings. Noah's name popped up on the screen. I hesitated for a few seconds before answering it. Good morning, Father. His voice sounded unusually soft. How are you feeling today? Fine, I answered dryly. Listen, I'm calling to apologize for yesterday. Heather and I were unforgivable. That cake. It was a terrible, terrible joke. I'm so embarrassed. I remained silent, letting the pause linger. I wonder how long he can maintain that tone of contrition. Father, are you listening? Yes, Noah, I am listening, and I can hear you very well. Heather and I were wondering, maybe you'd be willing to have lunch with us today, as a real celebration of your birthday, at Lobster Bay, your favorite restaurant. I raised an eyebrow in surprise. Lobster Bay was indeed my favorite restaurant, but how did Noah know that? I didn't remember ever mentioning it in conversations with him. Apparently, he did a little research. Thanks for the invitation, but I've already arranged to meet Vincent, I lied, wanting to see the reaction. Oh, he sounded strained. With your lawyer? Something important? Discussing my financial affairs. I see, he paused. Why don't you reschedule? I really want to make up for last night's incident. I can't, Noah. It's important. Then maybe tomorrow? Or the weekend? I'd really like to talk to you, Dad, to mend our relationship. I decided to soften a little to see how far his sudden concern would go. Perhaps this weekend. I'll think about it and let you know. Great. The joy in his voice sounded almost genuine. I'll be waiting for your call. And Father, I'm really sorry about what happened. I hope you can forgive me. After we said goodbye, I put the phone away and went back to contemplating the sea. Not 5 minutes later, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting company and headed for the door with some wariness. Heather stood on the threshold with a large basket in her hands, smiling her most charming smile. Otis, I'm sorry for the unannounced visit. I just wanted to drop off this little gift for you. She held out the basket. I remembered Eleanor saying you liked homemade pastries and good tea. I accepted the basket and looked inside. There were several kinds of cookies, jars of jam, boxes of high-end tea, and a bottle of good scotch. Thank you, Heather. This is unexpected. Can I come in for a minute? She asked with hope in her eyes. I hesitated, but then nodded and stepped back, letting her into the apartment. Heather walked inside, looking around with obvious interest. She rarely visited my new abode. What a beautiful view, she said, walking over to the panoramic window overlooking the bay. I can see why you chose this place. Yes, the sea has always been my passion. Heather turned to me, her face expressing sincere or well-imitated remorse. Otis, I came to apologize in person. Yesterday didn't go the way it was supposed to. That horrible cake. I swear we didn't order that kind of lettering. It must have been some kind of horrible mistake. Or someone's evil joke, I added, watching her reaction. She lowered her eyes. Yes, it's possible. And I understand how it seemed, especially after you heard our conversation with Noah, but believe me, we never meant to hurt you. To hurt you. Did we? I raised an eyebrow. What about the useless old man and the plans to take custody of me? Heather blushed. We were upset, talking nonsense. Noah was worried about your health, about you living alone. It wasn't properly expressed, but at the core, it was concern. I almost laughed at such a brazen lie, but held back, determined to keep playing the game. And the sudden revelation of my financial situation had no bearing on that concern? Of course not, she exclaimed. Though I confess we were surprised. You've always lived so modestly that we thought the sale of the company didn't bring in much income. I've never been a spender, Heather. I prefer to invest my money rather than spend it on ostentatious luxuries. She nodded, as if that were the wisest thought she'd ever heard. That's so wise, Otis. Noah could learn a lot from you in terms of financial discipline. I suppressed a chuckle. Just yesterday she thought I was a stingy old man, and today she admired my financial wisdom. Speaking of Noah, she continued, did he call you today? We thought we'd take you out to dinner to celebrate your birthday. Yes, he did. I decided to play along. I told him I might take him out to dinner this weekend. Heather's face brightened. That would be wonderful. I'll cook something special. Or we could go to a restaurant wherever you prefer. We'll see, I said evasively. I have a lot to do with Vincent this week. Sure, she nodded, but I could see her shoulders tense at the mention of my lawyer. Speaking of which, Noah and I thought it might be easier if you transferred some of the funds into our joint account. For your needs, of course. It would make it easier for us to take care of you. That's it. I expected them to start probing, but I didn't think it would be so quick and direct. It's an interesting proposition, I said in a neutral tone. I'll think it over. No rush, of course, she added hastily, apparently realizing she'd been too hasty. It's just a thought. And one more thing. Noah and I were thinking that maybe it would be more convenient for you to live closer to us. Not in a nursing home, of course, but perhaps in the guest house on our property. It's cozy, with a separate entrance. You'd keep your independence, but we'd be able to come to your aid more quickly if something happened. I pretended to be thoughtful, though inwardly I was disgusted by this obvious attempt to gain control not only over my money, but also over myself. It requires thought, Heather. I'm attached to this apartment and the view from the window. Of course you are, she smiled understandingly. Just think about it. And now I have to go. I have a meeting in half an hour. But I'm really glad we talked, Otis. And again, I apologize for yesterday. After Heather left, I picked up the phone and dialed Vincent's number. They've already started, I said, instead of saying hello. So soon? Vincent sounded surprised. What did they do? Noah had called with an apology and an invitation to lunch. Heather personally delivered a gift basket and offered to transfer some of my money to their account for my convenience, and to move into their guest house. Vincent whistled. They don't waste any time. What did you tell them? That I'd think about it. I want to see how far they'll go in their hypocrisy. Be careful, Otis, Vincent warned. They could be more dangerous than you think, especially now that they know about the money and realize you're angry with them. What do you mean? What we discussed in the car yesterday, he reminded me. If they were really planning to get custody of you, now they have even more motive to do it. $5 million is a strong incentive. I sighed. Vincent was right. Yesterday, after leaving Noah, we'd had a long talk in his car parked outside my house. He'd warned me that Noah and Heather might take more drastic steps than just apologies and gifts. I'll be on the lookout, I promised. But I want to see how far they'll go. It'll be enlightening. Then let's meet tonight. I'll show you the documents we've prepared. And Otis, maybe we should install cameras in the apartment, just in case. You think they might try to do something to me? I don't think they'll physically harm you, Vincent said cautiously. But they might try to find evidence of your incapacity, forgetfulness, confusion, irrational decisions, anything that might convince a court that you're incapable of managing your own affairs. And you think they're going to record me? I felt a rising anger. It's possible. That's why I suggest you get ahead of them. Record every meeting you have with them, and be very careful what you say and do in their presence. After we talked, I sat for a long time looking at Heather's gift basket. I decided not to touch any food or drink, even though I realized that my suspicions might be paranoia. But in my situation, it was better to be safe. Later that day, Vincent arrived with the paperwork. We sat in my living room, discussing the new will and the trust fund I planned to set up for the young sailors of Halifax. It's all done, Vincent said, handing me the file. All I need is your signature and the trust fund will be officially established. I'd recommend that you don't sign yet, though. Give Noah and Heather some time to show their true intentions. I nodded, looking over the documents. How far do you think they'll go? At $5 million? Pretty far, Vincent shook his head. But I don't think they really plan to insult you with the cake. That would have been too stupid of them, even if they thought you were poor. I agree, I nodded. It was probably an accident, or one of those jokes that seem funny until you realize what they look like from the outside. Either way, they'll do anything to make it up to me now. Or more accurately, make it look like they're remorseful. And I'm going to let them do it, I decided. I wanted to see how ingenious they could be in their hypocrisy. Vincent looked at me with concern. Don't get carried away with this game, Otis. Remember that ultimately this is your family, however imperfect it may be. Family? I grinned bitterly. No, Vincent. My family was Eleanor's. And maybe Noah once upon a time when he was a child. Now I have no family. Only people bound to me by blood and lust for my money. Vincent didn't argue, though I could see that my words saddened him. He'd always been a little sentimental, especially when it came to family ties. But he'd never seen Noah gradually drift away from me, from loving son to calculating heir. After Vincent left, I checked my phone. 2 missed calls from Noah and a message. Dad, call me when you can. There's a great idea for our dinner this weekend. Heather says you gave her a warm welcome today. I'm so glad we're getting a fresh start. Love you. Love you. When was the last time Noah had said those words to me? I couldn't remember. Perhaps when he asked for money for a down payment on a house, or when he wanted me to use my connections to help him get an important client. I put the phone away, not wanting to answer it now. Instead, I went to the window again and stared out to sea. The storm was intensifying, the waves crashing against the shore with increasing fury. So was the storm inside me. I decided to play along with Noah and Heather in their game of contrition, to see how far they were willing to go for my forgiveness and my money. It would be an experiment of sorts, a final test for my son and his wife. And if they fail that test, I will not hesitate to exclude them from my life and my will. It may be cruel, but no more cruel than a cake that says, "Helpless old man out," on my 74th birthday. The week after my birthday turned into a parade of fake attention. Each day brought new evidence of Noah and Heather's sudden love. On Wednesday morning, a courier delivered a huge fruit basket and a note. Love from your son and daughter-in-law. After lunch, Noah personally delivered the expensive whiskey I supposedly mentioned in a conversation a few years ago. It's amazing how his memory has improved since the news of my condition. On Thursday, Heather sent a private chef to cook dinner for me. I politely declined, citing my poor health. In reality, I just didn't want to eat food prepared at their behest. Vincent had made me paranoid, but it was better to be reassured. On Friday, a new TV with a huge screen and a home theater system arrived. It came with a note: "So you can enjoy nautical documentaries at their best. We know how much you love them." I wonder how they knew about my love of sea documentaries. I never talked to Noah about it. Saturday morning, the doorbell rang. A young man in a courier's uniform stood on the doorstep with a bouquet of flowers. "Mr. Bancroft, delivery for you." I took the bouquet and read the attached card. "These flowers reminded me of my mom. She always loved lilies. I hope they make you happy too. Love, Noah." Lilies were indeed Eleanor's favorite flowers. But in all the years since her death, Noah had never once mentioned it. Was he suddenly overwhelmed by memories? Or had he just hired someone to dig up such details? I put the flowers in a vase, pondering how far my relatives were willing to take their game. Before I could do that, the phone rang. Noah's number. "Good morning, Father." His voice sounded cheerful. "Did you get my little gift?" "Yeah, thanks for the flowers. They, reminded me of your mother. That's why I chose them," he said, his voice warm. "Listen, Heather and I were wondering if you'd like to have dinner with us tonight, at Lobster Bay, like I suggested. I've decided to go for it. It was time to see how they behaved in person after a week of apologies in absentia." "Okay, Noah. What time?" "Oh, that's great." He wasn't hiding his excitement. "I made a reservation for 7 tonight. I'll pick you up at 6:30, okay?" "No need. I'll drive myself. I'll meet you at the restaurant." "But Father," he stammered, "I'd like to pick you up. At your age, you shouldn't be driving at night." There was a familiar note of condescension in his tone. "At your age" was a phrase I'd heard him say more and more often over the years. "I'll call a cab, Noah," I said firmly. "I'll see you at the restaurant." He reluctantly agreed, and we ended the conversation. I leaned back in my chair, thinking about the evening ahead. I'd have to stay alert and listen carefully. They would probably try to find out my plans for the inheritance. Toward evening, as I was getting dressed for dinner, the phone rang again. This time it was Vincent. "How was your week?" he asked after the greeting. "Are they continuing their offensive?" "You can't imagine how much." I told him about the deluge of gifts and sudden acts of caring. "Dining with them tonight at Lobster Bay." "Be careful, Otis," Vincent warned. "Don't drink anything you haven't seen open in front of you, and watch what you say. They might be recording the conversation." "Don't you think that's a little paranoid?" I grinned, though I had the same concerns myself. "Maybe, but $5 million can make people very resourceful." After talking to Vincent, I finished my preparations and hailed a cab to Lobster Bay. It was one of Halifax's best seafood restaurants. I really loved the place, although I had visited rarely since Eleanor was gone. When I arrived, Noah and Heather were already waiting at the entrance. They looked impeccable. He in an austere suit, she in an elegant black dress, with the pearl necklace I'd once given Eleanor, and she'd passed on to her sister-in-law. It was unpleasant to see it around Heather's neck, but I kept my emotions in check. "Father!" Noah stepped forward with a broad smile, embracing me with a warmth he didn't recognize. "You look beautiful." "Otis." Heather hugged me too, enveloping me in a cloud of expensive perfume. "It's so good to see you." Their enthusiasm was so exaggerated that it bordered on caricature. I responded discreetly to their greetings, and we made our way to the restaurant, where we were escorted to a table overlooking the bay. "I booked the best table for us," Noah explained proudly. "I know how much you love the view of the water." I nodded, gazing out into the evening bay. Ships returning to port always made me nostalgic for the times I'd been at the helm. The waiter brought the menu and wine list. Noah immediately took the initiative. "Father, I know you like Chateau Margaux. May I order a bottle of the 2000-year vintage?" I really appreciated that wine, but I didn't remember ever discussing it with my son. Apparently, he did a real investigation into my preferences. "Thank you, Noah, but today I'd prefer mineral water. I take medications that don't mix with alcohol." It was a lie, but I remembered Vincent's warning and preferred to stay sober and alert. "Sure," Noah quickly refocused. "Then maybe some fresh juice or tea?" "Water will suffice," I replied firmly. Dinner continued in the same vein, Noah and Heather trying to please me, reminiscing about the happy moments of our married life, most of which had been blatantly made up or embellished beyond recognition. "Remember, Dad, when you used to take me fishing when I was 10? Noah asked with a dreamy smile. "That day when I caught a huge salmon and you were so proud." I barely restrained myself from snorting. The only time I'd taken Noah fishing had ended in a tantrum. He was afraid of worms and refused to touch the rod. No salmon had ever come close. Vaguely, I replied, deciding not to expose his fiction. It was a long time ago. Too long ago, Heather said. But now we'll have plenty of time to create new memories. Won't we, darling? Noah nodded vigorously. Absolutely. By the way, Dad, I was thinking, you've always dreamed of traveling to the Mediterranean, haven't you? We could organize a family trip this summer. You, me, and Heather all together. I've never mentioned wanting to visit the Mediterranean. In fact, I'd been there at least a dozen times during my years with the shipping company and had no particular desire to return. That's an interesting suggestion, I said neutrally. But let's establish our relationship here in Halifax before we plan to travel together. Noah frowned slightly, but quickly returned the smile. Of course, Father. One thing at a time. By the way, have you decided about our offer to move into the guest house yet? We've already started renovating it to make you comfortable. You started renovating it without even getting my consent? I raised an eyebrow. Heather quickly interjected. We just wanted it to be ready when you made your decision. No pressure, Otis. Just caring. I appreciate your foresight, I replied, barely concealing my sarcasm. But I haven't made a decision yet. Noah and Heather exchanged quick glances. I saw her nod slightly at him as if signaling. Father, Noah began in a more serious tone, I'd like to talk to you about your financial affairs. Heather and I are concerned that Vincent Price may not always be acting in your best interest. Is that so? I kept a neutral expression on my face. Why would you say that? Well, he's been handling your money for years, right? And you live a pretty, modest. That suggests that maybe he's not as efficient as he could be. I could hardly contain my laughter. My modest lifestyle was a conscious choice. Thanks to Vincent, my fortune had grown several times over the past few years, but I preferred not to advertise it. Vincent has been my friend for over 40 years, I replied calmly. I trust him completely. Friendship and business are different things, Father, Noah insisted. As a financial advisor, I can tell you that close relationships often interfere with objective judgment. I have an acquaintance who is a very experienced financier. Maybe we should at least get a second opinion. I looked at my son and saw greed lurking beneath the mask of concern. He was practically drooling as he imagined taking control of my money. I'll think about it, I replied, deciding to keep playing the game. After dinner, as we left the restaurant, Noah insisted on driving me home. This time I agreed, wanting to hear what they would talk about in the car. Dad, there's something we need to talk about, Noah began as we drove through the night in Halifax. I've noticed that lately you've been more distracted. Really? I acted surprised. How does it manifest itself? Well, for example, you forgot about our arrangement for your birthday, Heather interjected from the back seat. And your love of the Mediterranean. And our fishing trip, Noah added. That's normal at your age, but maybe you should consult a doctor for prevention. They were practically accusing me of dementia for not remembering their made-up stories. It would be funny if it wasn't so cynical. I made an appointment for you to see Dr. Phelps, Noah continued. He's a specialist in geriatric medicine. He's a very good doctor. You made me an appointment without my consent? My voice turned cold. It's just a checkup, Father. It's no big deal. Heather and I are concerned about your health. I realized that they had begun to prepare the ground for declaring me incompetent. They were gathering evidence of my forgetfulness and irrational behavior. Vincent was right. They were really going to go very far. I'll think about it, I repeated, deciding not to have a confrontation now. When we pulled up to my house, Noah insisted on walking me to the door. In the elevator, he said casually, Dad, have you thought about giving me power of attorney so that I could help you with your affairs if you get sick or just tired of the paperwork? Why would I do that? I have Vincent. Vincent is a good lawyer, but he's not family, and family will always take better care of you than outsiders. He looked me in the eye with fake sincerity. I want to make sure you get everything you need if something happens. We walked up to my apartment door, and I slid the key into the lock with relief, ready to be rid of this hypocritical performance. Thanks for dinner, Noah. It was, informative. Will you think about the power of attorney and a visit to Dr. Phelps? He insisted. I'll think about it, I said a third time as I closed the door. Left alone, I immediately called Vincent and told him about the evening. They're not even trying to be subtle, I concluded. Straightforward about my forgetfulness and the need for a medical examination. This is serious, Otis. Vincent's voice sounded concerned. They're clearly setting the stage for a custody suit. We need to be one step ahead of them. What do you suggest? We meet with Malcolm Haig tomorrow. You remember him? Your old friend who became a retired judge. Of course I remember Mal. I haven't seen him in years. He can give good advice. Besides, his certificate of competency will carry weight in court if it comes to that. The next day we met Malcolm in a small cafe on the outskirts of Halifax, where we were unlikely to be seen by Noah's acquaintances. Malcolm hadn't changed much over the years, the same gaunt figure, shrewd eyes, and reserved smile. We hugged like old friends, and I felt a sudden relief that I was with someone who had known me before I was a successful businessman. "Otis, you look good," he said as we sat down at the table. "I can see something's bothering you, though." Vincent summarized the situation, leaving out the details about the cake, the talk about my forgetfulness, and the attempts to get power of attorney. Malcolm listened intently, frowning at times. When Vincent finished, he was silent for a long moment, thinking about what he'd heard. "This is more serious than I expected," he said at last. "Noah and Heather are clearly plotting an attack on your ability to act. And unfortunately, they have the advantage of being your family, and the courts often favor relatives in cases like this." "What's your advice?" I asked. "First, document everything. Every meeting, every conversation. If possible, record them secretly." Malcolm leaned closer. "Second, get a full medical examination by an independent doctor. Not the one Noah suggests, but a specialist you trust. Get a written statement of your full legal capacity." "I've already scheduled it," Vincent nodded. "I know a neurologist who isn't in Noah's social circle." "Good," Malcolm approved. "Third, put most of your assets in an irrevocable trust. That will protect your assets even if the court appoints Noah as guardian." "We're working on that," Vincent said. "One last thing, Otis." Malcolm looked me straight in the eye. "Be careful. Don't give them any reason to think you suspect them of anything. Play their game, but be alert at all times. Don't sign any documents without consulting Vincent, and never be alone with them without witnesses." I nodded, realizing the gravity of the situation. "Thanks, Mal. Your advice is invaluable." "That's what old friends are for," he smiled slightly. "By the way, I'd be happy to be a witness in court if necessary. I've known you for almost 50 years, and I can say with certainty that you're of sound mind." After meeting Malcolm, I felt both anxiety and determination. Anxiety that my own son would declare me incompetent for money, and determination not to let him do it. When I got home, I found a message on my answering machine from Noah. "Dad, calling to see how you're feeling after last night. Heather and I were thinking of stopping by today with a little surprise. Call me back as soon as you can." I didn't bother to call back. I needed time to strategize, time to protect myself from those who should have been my support in my old age, but instead saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to wealth. Standing at the window and looking out over the bay, I made a decision. It was time to stop this game and show Noah and Heather that they weren't dealing with a helpless old man, but with a man who had built an empire and wouldn't let anyone, not even his own son, take away his dignity and independence. I spent the next 3 days preparing for the final act of this family drama. Vincent helped me file all the necessary paperwork to set up a charitable foundation. We underwent a medical examination by an independent specialist who confirmed my full capacity. Malcolm provided written testimony of my clear mind and rational decisions based on our long-standing friendship. All the while, Noah and Heather continued their campaign to win my favor. Calls, messages, gifts. The flow of their attention never ceased. I responded politely, but with restraint, giving no reason for suspicion or false hope. Finally, I decided it was time to put an end to this farce. I called Noah and suggested we meet at his house on Saturday night for a serious conversation about the future. He happily agreed, apparently deciding that I was ready to discuss handing over control of my finances. "That's great, Dad," he exclaimed. "Heather and I will be very happy. Should we get someone else, a lawyer or a financial advisor?" "No," I said firmly. "Just the three of us. And Vincent." "Vincent?" There was a hint of disappointment in his voice. "Are you sure he should be there? It's a family meeting. He's my lawyer and my confidant. Yeah, he should be there." Noah reluctantly agreed, and we set it for 7 o'clock that evening. Saturday morning, I met Vincent in his office to go over the final details. "Are you sure you want to do this today?" he asked, looking at me with concern. "We could wait a little longer, gather more evidence of their intentions." "No," I shook my head. "I'm tired of this game, Vincent. Tired of pretending not to see their hypocrisy. It's time to call it a day." He nodded, understanding my resolve. "Good. The paperwork's ready. He handed me a folder. An irrevocable trust for the Eleanor Bancroft Halifax Young Seafarers Foundation. After your signature, $5 million will be transferred to the fund. Another $10 million will be transferred to it upon your death. 15 million, I repeated quietly. Eleanor would be pleased. She always wanted to help talented children from poor families. Are you leaving anything for Noah? Vincent asked cautiously. I wondered. Noah was still my son, in spite of everything he'd done. The only connection I had left to Eleanor. Yes, I finally decided. The house Eleanor and I lived in. It had been paid for a long time and the maintenance costs were low. And a small sum, $50,000. Not enough to tempt his greed, but enough to help him in his time of need. Vincent nodded and amended the paperwork. It's done. Just need your signature. I took the pen and signed the papers, feeling strangely relieved. It was like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Now all I have to do is tell them, I said, putting the pen away. That evening, Vincent and I pulled up to Noah and Heather's house at 7 o'clock sharp. The house was glowing with lights, as if they were preparing for a holiday, not a business meeting. Heather opened the door, dressed in an elegant dress with perfect hair and makeup. Otis, Vincent, welcome, she smiled radiantly, stepping aside to let us inside. Noah is in the living room, waiting for you. We walked into the spacious living room, where Noah was already pouring drinks. Father, I'm glad you came. He shook my hand with exaggerated warmth. Whiskey? Or maybe a scotch? I have your favorite Macallan. Water, please, I replied, sitting down in the chair. We're having a serious conversation, and I want to keep my mind clear. Noah cast a quick glance at Heather, but immediately put the smile back on his face. Of course, Father. Whatever you say. He handed me a glass of water and sat down across from me next to Heather. They looked like the perfect couple, ready for a family photo shoot for a glossy magazine. So, Noah began after a short pause, you wanted to talk about the future. Heather and I have been thinking about it a lot lately, too. We have a few ideas we'd like to share. I'm sure you have a lot of ideas, I said dryly. But first, I'd like to say what I came to say. I opened my briefcase and pulled out the folder of documents Vincent and I had prepared. I've made a decision about my inheritance, I began, looking straight into Noah's eyes. After much thought and observation of my family's behavior. Noah and Heather stepped forward, their eyes alight with anticipation. The bulk of my fortune, $15 million, will be donated to a charitable fund to support young sailors in Halifax. The fund will be named after Eleanor. Their faces stretched in surprise and disappointment. What? Noah was the first to break the stunned silence. 15 million? But you said 5. 5 million is only part of my fortune, Noah. The part you found out about on my birthday. Heather tried to intervene, keeping her smile, though strained. Otis, it's a very noble decision. Charity is a wonderful idea. But perhaps we should keep some of the funds for the family as well. For Noah, your only son. I'm not finished, I continued calmly. For Noah, I'm leaving the house where Eleanor and I lived, and $50,000. $50,000? Noah jumped to his feet, his face contorted with anger. That's ridiculous. That's an insult. Noah, please. Heather tried to calm him, but her own eyes were furious too. Let's hear my father out. There's nothing to hear. Noah waved her hand away. He wants to give 15 million to some stupid foundation, and I get a measly 50,000? Me, his only son? The same son who celebrated my humiliation over a cake labeled helpless old man out, I asked quietly but firmly. The very son who planned to declare me incapacitated to gain control of my money? Noah turned pale. It's not true. I never... Don't lie to me, Noah, I interrupted him. I know everything. About your plans with Dr. Phelps, about your conversations with the custody lawyer, about your attempts to prove I was oblivious. Who told you that? He turned sharply to Vincent. Was it you? Did you turn him against me? No one turned me against him, I shook my head. I saw and heard everything myself. Your behavior after the news about my money was more than telling. Heather decided to change tactics. Otis, there may have been a misunderstanding. We were really concerned about your health, your safety, living alone at your age. Stop it, Heather, I said tiredly. Enough of this show. I've already decided everything. The documents are signed. The fund is created, and the money has already been transferred. The mask of politeness finally fell off Heather's face. You can't do that, she exclaimed. It's Noah's inheritance. It's his birthright. No one has a right to money another person earned, I replied firmly. Not even your own children. Noah paced the room like a hunted animal. "It's not fair," he shouted. "You've always been like this. Controlling, overbearing, never thinking about my needs. Always your company. Your ships were more important than me." "I gave you everything," I replied quietly. "Education, opportunities, support. But I couldn't give you what you really wanted, to be me. To inherit not only my money, but my success, my respect in the community. You can't pass that on, Noah. It has to be earned." "Earn it?" he snorted contemptuously. "How do you? Traveling the world while my mom raised me alone? Skipping my school events for business meetings? Making me feel like I'd never be good enough for the great Otis Bancroft?" There was some truth in what he said, and it hurt more than I expected. I really hadn't always been the perfect father. Maybe some of the blame for the man Noah had become lay with me. "I've made mistakes," I admitted, "and I regret them. But what you're doing now is your choice, Noah, not mine." "Fuck you," he spat out. "You and your regrets. You ruined my life, and now you're robbing me of what's rightfully mine." "What right, Noah?" I asked. "By birthright, or the right of someone who laughed at his own father's humiliation?" He didn't have an answer, just looked at me with hatred. Heather decided to come at it from a different angle. "Otis," she came toward me, trying to take my hand, but I pulled away. "Think about Eleanor. What would she say? She'd want her son to get the inheritance you two created together." "Don't you dare use my wife's name," I replied coldly. Eleanor loved Noah, but she wasn't blind to his shortcomings, and she would have fully supported the idea of a fund for young sailors. In fact, it was her idea that we had discussed years ago. "You're just getting back at us," Noah intervened. "For that stupid cake, for one stupid joke." "It's not about the cake, Noah," I shook my head. "The point is that you showed your true attitude toward me. You saw me not as a father, not as a man, but as an obstacle to be overcome in order to get the money." "That's not true," Heather exclaimed. "We love you." "You love my money," I calmly parried, "and you proved it by your actions." Vincent, who had been silent all this time, finally intervened. "The documents have already been drawn up and registered. Otis's decision is final and unchangeable." Noah turned to him sharply. "This is all your work. You turned him against us, influenced him when he was in a vulnerable state after his mom died." "Don't try to pass the buck, Noah," I said. "This is my decision, based on my observations and your actions." I stood up, signaling that the conversation was over. "We're leaving. The deeds to the house will be transferred to you through Vincent. The money will be in your account within the week." "That's it?" Noah looked at me in disbelief. "After everything we've been through together?" "What have we been through, Noah?" I asked. "When was the last time you did something for me that wasn't out of obligation or expectation of gain? When was the last time you took a genuine interest in my life?" He was silent, unable to find an answer. "Exactly," I nodded. "Maybe $50,000 is more than you deserve, but I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for Eleanor, who against all odds loved you." I turned to leave, but Heather blocked my path. "You can't just walk away," her face contorted with rage. "We've done so much for you. We've put up with so much over the years." "Put up with?" I looked her in the eye. "Is that what you call it? Put up with an old man keeping you from getting his money?" "That's not what I meant." She tried to back away, realizing she'd said too much. "No, that's exactly what I meant." I stepped around her and headed for the exit. "Goodbye, Noah, Heather. I hope you find something that will truly make you happy. Because money, as you'll soon realize, doesn't do that." As Vincent and I left the house, there was a rumble behind us. Apparently Noah had smashed something in a fit of rage. We got into the car and drove away in silence. "Are you okay?" Vincent asked when we were far away from the house. "I wasn't sure," I answered honestly. But I felt relieved, like I'd shed a heavy weight I'd been carrying for too long. "What are you going to do now?" I looked out the window at the lights of Halifax, the dark waters of the bay shimmering in the moonlight. "Live," I answered simply. "To enjoy what I have. Maybe I'll start traveling again. I've always wanted to see Alaska." When we pulled up to my house, I invited Vincent upstairs for a glass of whiskey. We sat by the window, looking out at the ships in the harbor, and talked about the past, the future, and the foundation that was to be my legacy. "You know," I said, when the night was already deep, "I always thought that the most important thing in life is success, achievements, material values that can be passed on to the next generation. But now I realize that the most important thing is relationships, real, genuine connections between people." Vincent nodded, raising his glass. "Here's to real relationships, and here's to new beginnings." To new beginnings, I echoed, clinking my glass with his. I lay awake that night reflecting on my life, my mistakes and accomplishments, my losses and gains. Perhaps I hadn't been a perfect father. Perhaps I had missed something important in raising Noah. But I couldn't change the past. I could only build the future. And that future didn't look so bleak. I had an apartment overlooking the bay that I loved. I had the means to live comfortably. There was a foundation to help young people realize their dreams. And there were true friends, few but loyal, like Vincent and Malcolm. I was no longer bound to those who saw me only as a source of income. No longer did I have to pretend not to notice their hypocrisy. I was free from toxic relationships, from false expectations, from the burden of unreasonable hopes. At my age, many people are afraid of being alone. But I realize that being alone doesn't mean being lonely. It is better to be at peace with yourself than to be surrounded by people who see you only as a means to an end. In the morning, I woke up with a sense of lightness and peace that I hadn't experienced in a long time. Outside the window, a new day was dawning. Ships were coming in and out of the harbor, continuing in perpetual motion like life itself. I was ready for this new day, a new phase, a real life, free of lies and pretense. A life where I could be myself without fear of judgment or manipulation. I was ready for a fresh start. At 74 years old, a clean slate,